Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very special CLE. We thank you for carving out some time this morning for this critical and important topic. We are excited to share with you, and we decided to switch things up just a bit and present the CLE in a format of a talk show instead of the traditional format. My colleagues, Janine, Dunlap, Kiah, Heather Kelly, and I spend time in project meetings, bouncing ideas off of one another and sharing the work in a real and relatable way, and thought this format would be both entertaining and enlightening. So without further ado, welcome and thank you for tuning in to a special edition of The Legal Review with Kristen. I am your host, Kristen Wilson, your favorite non-attorney on a mission to share relevant legal topics in an accessible way, nicely broken down so that we can all know what's going on, not just for the lawyers in the room. During these pandemic times, we are so happy to still have our viewers join us virtually. Please remember to mute your mics and turn off your cameras. We love to hear from the audience, so please use the chat for any comments or questions. Tell us your name, tell us where you're from. Drop that information in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to know where you're tuning in from. And of course, if you have comments and questions along the way, we would love to hear from you as well. I am so excited to have Janine Dunlap Kiah, attorney and project director from SeniorLAW Center, joining us to talk about an issue that I wasn't really familiar with, but now I am totally fascinated by. It's called being trauma-informed and how using certain techniques as a lawyer can really make a difference in helping clients. Is that correct? I mean, what are we talking about today, Janine?
Hi, good morning. First, good morning. And thank you so much for having me. And yes, you got it. You know, in a nutshell, as an intro, it's really being trauma informed is a mindset. It's basically boiling down to being people-centered, individualizing your client's needs, based on their personal experiences. It does take more time for each client, but without engaging in this way, you are really losing an opportunity to elevate the client relationship and the success of advocacy overall.
This is going to be great. I feel like this is going to be an amazing show, and we are just getting started, and I'm already excited about the topic. Our viewers here know that we love to have a good time here. Plenty of laughs, some dancing sometimes. Sometimes we explore new breakfast cocktails or
I love that part of your show.
or the hottest trend in fashion. But today we are all focused on trauma-informed care. And today's episode is sponsored by SeniorLAW Center. And as a bonus, for any attorneys viewing, you will earn 1 substantive plus half ethics credits. That's a lot of fanciness, So 1.5 credits. No idea what that means because I'm not a lawyer, but I was told people would be ecstatic. So thank you to SeniorLAW Center for sponsoring the CLE and allegedly making lawyers happy all over Pennsylvania. To give us a little background on the organization, we have our resident know-it-all, AKA the voice of reason, Heather Kelly. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Janine, and good morning, everyone. As Kristen stated, SeniorLAW Center has generously sponsored this program, and I wanted to give just a few highlights regarding this leading legal aid organization. SeniorLAW Center is the largest legal services provider to older adults in Pennsylvania. They provide legal services to Pennsylvanians aged 60 and older. They serve over 10,000 seniors a year. Their main offices are in Philadelphia, but they also have offices in Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties, and they can provide legal assistance throughout the state of Pennsylvania via their helpline. They can provide direct representation, legal advice, referrals, community education, and professional training and advocacy. So thank you again, SeniorLAW Center, and back to you, Kristen.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks for always keeping us on point. Heather will probably be with us. Janine talked to us about Heather's role. She'll be popping in, and so whenever I see her screen, I'm just going to be like, Heather, what you got for me, okay? Throughout with the facts and the figures, and she's our resident know-it-all. So let's dive right in. Janine, you are our project director. Tell us about the project that you oversee.
Yes, I'm happy to. Again, I am the project director. for Pursuing Justice for Grandparents Raising Grandchildren in Pennsylvania project. It is funded by a LEAP grant from the ACL. It's a federal agency, a division of DHHS. And, we were inaugural recipients of this grant, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to address a situation that we find, is pressing, and we want to certainly raise more awareness. And that is the increasing occurrence of older kin, whether it's a grandparent or often great grandparents, who have to step in when the parents are unable to care for the children. And I will say at the heart of it, briefly regarding the project, it's really aimed at keeping children out of the traditional foster care system. And, our goal is, if we support older kin, older family caregivers, to step in and, help them through the legal process and, other issues that, there's other ancillary issues, of course, along with being an older person who will, often suddenly take on the role of being a parent. If they're not supported to do that, then these children would often end up in traditional foster care. And our studies have shown that children do not fare better in foster care versus staying with their family. So I just definitely wanted to plug also, what we do, but definitely close to my heart is the why.
Yeah, okay. So grandparents raising grandchildren. I guess I didn't understand that this was a formal situation. I've heard of people being raised by a grandchildren, by a grandparent. But I didn't understand, I guess I just didn't understand how big of a deal this is. And since Heather has appeared, I'm guessing maybe you have some stats or some additional information about that.
I certainly do, Kristen. Nationally, over 6 million children live with a relative caregiver. And 66% of those caregivers are grandparents or great-grandparents. In Pennsylvania, over 200,000 grandparents are caring for their grandchildren. The Pennsylvania Secretary of Aging estimates that grandparents raising grandchildren, or GRG as we like to call them, save the state $1 billion annually due to reduced need for child welfare services and foster care.
That is a lot of people, and 1 billion saved annually. I mean, that's a staggering number. Why does this occur, and why do so many people end up needing to take this role on? I mean, is it like your grandmother just does it, or there are situations where this is pressing?
Yeah, well, grand families form due to parental absenteeism. There are many different reasons for this absenteeism. This can include death, chronic illness, incarceration, mental illness, substance dependency, and also instances of abuse and neglect.
Oh, I didn't realize that so many families were impacted in this way. So thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. It's a lot of people, and it's just families, especially in Pennsylvania. I didn't know. I mean, it nationally makes sense, but in Pennsylvania, this seems to be a very, very big need. And what does this mean for you, Janine? How does this affect your work? And then how does this play into this whole idea of trauma?
That's a perfect question. So just bouncing off exactly what your voice of reason. I totally love that moniker, by the way. You think you can get my kids to call me that? That would be awesome.
Right? Wouldn't we all love that?
So as the voice of reason mentioned, parental absenteeism, may have many root causes, but none of those that she mentioned are either one, wanted, right? They're not planned for, and frankly, they're not desirable, right? They're not like these happy surprises. Okay. So, when she mentioned, abuse, neglect, mental illness, incarceration, none of those are situations where someone anticipated being in this situation and certainly didn't hope for it. I mean, the flip side of that is, it's not like there's an intact couple. You imagine housing secure, food secure, no drug problems, mental problems, everything's perfect,
right?
And the one parent looks to the other and says, you know what, I think it'd be fun. Why don't we send the kids and have them go live with your mother? Right? Like who just comes up with that, right? Or some older woman, 70, 75 years old, living in a fixed income, just doesn't one day say, you know what I think I want to do? I think I want to raise a 5-year-old.
Sure.
Let me go see what my great-granddaughter's doing, for the rest of my life, right? So when they ask, well, what is the background? And there is a unique background to GRGs because of that. What does it have to do with trauma-informed? Because the only reason why these families are, as we affectionately call grand families, I love that, but as these grand families are only formed through crisis. They're only formed as a result of trauma. So having that in your mind and knowing that you need to approach these families with that mindset I was talking about, I know we'll talk more later, but what that means about being individualized for their needs is important, because nobody asked for that. Nobody asked for the situation. So they're traumatized and they have to work through that.
Yeah, and so I was over here thinking, who would need this? What situation would you need to be in? Who exactly were you talking about? But it just sounds like you're really talking about,
no,
everyone,
I'm talking about everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. I will hands down say, when we're talking about grand families, GRGs, they all experience trauma. They're not, unless they're one of those wonky, hypotheticals I just said.
Right.
They only came to be because of some traumatic event that took down not just one parent. We're talking both parents. That's a lot. That's a huge obstacle, right?
Yeah.
For both parents to be unavailable. So it's traumatic, and that they have a lot to work through.
Okay, let's back up. Okay, that's a lot, but let me back up for a second. What is trauma? Like, where are we going here? What is trauma?
Okay, perfect. That's great. So trauma, there's a definition that was cited in an article by Philadelphia attorneys Katz and Holder. And the definition I'm pulling from it is saying that trauma basically can occur when a person experiences a threat to their life, their physical being, or their sanity, right? 3 major pieces. So when you experience a perceived threat, or real or perceived, it can cause trauma. Now, the response to that event, however colossal it was that gave them that threat, it changes the person's internal intuition. It completely throws it off, and ordinary coping is no longer possible.
Right.
Trauma basically, it reorganizes the way the brain manages perceptions.
Okay.
So if I can give an example, which is
just
an example. Okay. So basically, if I was attacked from behind, I'm attacked from behind, I was a victim of a physical crime. Okay, a battery. I may be traumatized from that experience. Now, another time I could be out and about, minding my business, and someone comes up from behind me and they grab me. They tap me on the shoulder or grab me or something. I may turn around, mace them, kick them, throw them to the ground. I pick up the phone, I call the police. I say, this person just attacked me. Now the other person may be in pain and say, oh my goodness, I was trying to catch you. You left your phone at the table, you left your bag. I don't know, like that person is just whatever. But in my mind, I say, no, you tried to attack me. I have now the perception, if someone touches me and I don't see it coming, I'm being attacked from my experience.
Yeah.
So that's just like a very boiled down example.
Gotcha. So that was a great example. And I never thought about, I guess, in the form of lawyering, that there would be similar types of triggers. You hear with PTSD, if you will, with veterans, with, other populations, but this really breaks down, and what you said about the brain changing, that was very interesting, and how it receives and perceives information. And what you see on television for sure, the classic example of fireworks goes off and someone, thinks that they're in combat or something like that. Yeah.
Veterans of PTSD type. Right. That's exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay. So now that we know what trauma is, we know that all grand families experienced this trauma, where does this idea of trauma-informed care, if you will, come in?
Sure. So being trauma informed can mean rather many things. You know, for one, again, I've said it, I'll keep saying it, it's about being person centered. So that means, you know, as a practitioner, you can't go into a situation with your normal, you know, MO or be so process driven to the point of inflexibility. You know, first we do this, then we do that. Like this is how we do our intake. This, you know, all those, you know, systems, which is great, but it can't be inflexible. That you can't bend
Sure.
and pivot when the client needs it. You know, something in your normal course of behavior or the normal course of procedure may be triggering to someone else. And not that it's purposeful, and you certainly may not know it, but you're already starting off at a disadvantage
Sure.
because that client is being brought to a place of discomfort or feeling they're not in a safe zone. And you could be totally oblivious because you're just like, you know, what's the matter? Give me what I'm expecting. You know, you're expecting responses
Right.
and not tuning into something else that could be going on.
Yeah. So what's an example then? Can you give like a real life example of where you might have seen this before?
Yes. So, you know, I think about intake. That's definitely a good, I guess, a good example. I'm thinking of one in particular. So, for example, this is, you know, you're doing the intake, or I should say, the client consultation. So you're
Okay.
really gathering information. You know, you don't even know if you can take the case yet, right? You're gathering.
Okay.
And so you could, as a practitioner, you could be, you know, just giving, or rather asking very benign questions, background questions. Okay, what are you? You know, who are you? The relationship to the child. I mean, what's your name? Who's father? Who's mother? Where are they? That kind of thing. Well, if someone calls in and says, "Hey, you know, I want to know about getting custody of my great grandchild," you're like, "Okay, well, what did all these other people? Well, why are you asking me about that? Why are you asking me about these people? I'm just telling you, I've had my great grandchild, have them for like 9 months now. I need to get some things settled.
Right.
I don't have a court order. I just want to do it." And you know, you're thinking, okay, but I need to know where the parents are. You know, mind you, they're
Right.
lay people. They don't know anything about what courts need.
Right.
But you're thinking, you know, why are you being evasive? Or like, you know, I'm just trying to get names, addresses, and it seems like they're being uncooperative or just, you know, again, evading the question. And you're like, you called me for help, right? Like, I don't understand. You're calling me
Right.
for help. Why
Yes.
won't you,
Right.
you know, just do what I'm asking, basically? Why aren't you just
Right.
complying with what everything I'm saying? And if you don't take the time to perhaps see what's really going on, you
Right.
know, you can miss the opportunity there.
Huh. I mean,
Yeah.
that would really kind of throw me off though. I mean, I would be probably one of those thinking, hey, I'm trying to help you. I need this information. I mean, how do like how does that work?
Right, I know, but it's like, you know, in the one hand, like I said, you may have your process and like, okay, I need this information. You know, who's dad, who's mom? You don't know. Maybe that great grandmother doesn't want to disclose the fact that the father has never been identified. You don't know
Right.
who the father
Okay.
is. Okay. But
Gotcha.
you're talking about her granddaughter or her daughter. Maybe she doesn't, you're a stranger. Maybe she doesn't want to get into literally the deepest, darkest, and every skeleton in her closet right now. She's just met you, right? Or maybe she doesn't want to say that someone's OD'd on opioids. And that's why. Maybe she doesn't want to say someone's in jail. So maybe she doesn't want to
Yeah.
say Dia just got involved and had to remove the child for abuse and neglect. Maybe, you know, she doesn't want to get into that right now.
Right.
And the way it's manifesting is, you know, her going, I don't want to answer these questions.
Right. Okay. So I don't think about that in that way. But then when you started talking, I started thinking about my own grandmother, right, and how just proud she was, and how it just would take a lot, to get those kinds of answers in that situation. It would just take a lot to get from her. Period. You know what I mean? Because it was just more of a private, life that I feel like a lot of older people live. Is that what you would find to be true with your clients?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay. Okay.
And
This is deep. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I just feel like older kin are going through so much, older grandparents. Um, Maybe there's some grief. I don't know. Is there shame? Is there is there, thinking again about my grandmother, is there like situations where where it's just too painful to share?
it's exactly true. And I don't know if I saw a little message. I think Kelly Yuckley, you wanted to do your first poll?
Yes, if I could just break in for a moment. Attorneys who are requesting CLE credit for your participation in today's session, we will be doing 2 question poll boxes like this. This is the first of 2. I will leave this up for 2 minutes. Please respond in order to receive CLE credits. You must respond to both poll questions in order to receive credit. And Kristen and Janine, please feel free to continue. Thank you.
Okay, let's get a little full. So yes, so Kristen, you really hit this on the head. You must be so naturally intuitive. But a part of being, trauma informed, again, is recognizing the unique experience that these third-party custody cases, custody cases not involving the 2 biological parents, but when a third party has to step in due to parental absenteeism, it really causes that person, the grandparent, for example, to have to navigate so many different fronts. And as you mentioned, it could be that they're navigating their own disappointment, guilt, shame. Mind you, this is their child who is absent, or their grandchild, either way, that is absent for whatever those, reasons that we said, none of them great, right? So
Right.
they could be having their own issues of, yes, shame. Maybe they're saying, what did I do wrong? Who knows what's going on? It's all very emotional. So that's one prong, they're having to deal with their own emotional, or of course, we've had cases where a parent, of course, has died. So they're grieving. Okay,
Right.
they have grief.
Right.
It could be whatever. And then you add to it that they also have this now changed relationship with their grandchild, for example.
Sure.
Instead of being Mima and Pop Pop, now they're a parent. That changes the dynamic of that relationship.
Of the relationship. They can't just be fun, cool grandparents who take them for ice cream. Now they have to be disciplinarians, the whole nine, homework, wow. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's transition right there within the family. And then, definitely another point, which is certainly not least, the grandparent has to also deal with how the child in question is also dealing with the traumatic experience. Mind you, they're the ones whose parents, plural, are absent.
Right.
So whatever the cause, they are like, my mom and my dad are nowhere to be found, and now I have to be in this separate situation. It is very common that children, as a result, they very often have behavioral problems or emotional disturbances, and different things like that. So they're, these older kin are holding a lot. That's why we are so passionate about seeking more awareness and help for the situation, because they're holding a lot, way more than your traditional custody case.
Got it. So this is starting to make more sense to me, but how can you effectively do that you mentioned over the phone or in person if you feel like anything you do might trigger someone? It just sounds like so many things, like almost anything could trigger someone in a traumatic situation. So how does that work?
I see what you're saying. And I know it can sound really daunting. Like, oh my goodness, like you said, anything I say can be the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But I just harken back. If it sounds repetitive, it's just because it really is the hallmark. Being trauma informed, again, it's a mentality, it's a space that you opt into. And once you dedicate yourself to the ideals of being trauma informed, it's actually very natural. You're talking about a way to conduct yourself with empathy and compassion and
Sure.
understanding, you know, which is not like this terrible byproduct, you know, of using
Sure.
these techniques. But, you know, you strip away preconceived notions, you know, biases, you know, assumptions about with whom you're speaking. And you basically establish that you are trustworthy and that their individual case matters to you, that they're not a file number. They're not another stat for your report, that they're humanized and their experiences are safe with you. So it's an intimate portion of your life, of their life rather. You're dealing with an intimate portion of their life. And when you're talking about GRGs, it's not never a happy story. So you know, they feel like something is truly at stake that's personal to them. And you have to establish that you are indeed a safe place.
This is giving me all the feels today, Janine. I mean, what a special role that you have as practitioners to care, to dig a little deeper, to take a little bit more time, humanizing the client, not a stat or report. I mean, I know it sounds easier said than done, but those are things that, you know, when truthfully as a practitioner, we could be going through our own, you know, day-to-day trauma. You know, so I think that's beautiful, and giving me all the feels. Okay, so what does one actually do? I mean, practically, like how do you address the situation in a situation where you maybe have someone who you know, is hesitant over the phone or in person to answer those kinds of questions that are triggering? Like, what would you do in that situation?
Sure. So keeping with that same hypothetical, you know, I would take heed that the client is uneasy discussing the parents, right? In this case, every time I mention about parents, they're like,
Right. Okay.
why are you in my business? Right.
Yeah.
So I, for one example of an easy thing is, how about just skip it and move on? You know, instead of looking at this client intake form that's A through double Z, you know, section 4, you know, how about stuff from the bottom? I don't know, move around, do something different.
Sure.
That's what I was talking about, having processes that aren't, you know, inflexible. So I'm like, okay, I'm hitting a nerve with this topic. Let me move on. Let me see if there's something else I can get from them. You know what? I probably at this point, if I'm still at the who's who stage, I probably haven't even given them a chance to tell their story. Maybe I want to start there. Why don't I sit back and stop interviewing them and let them talk? You know, it's just about, like, it isn't, you know, it's not like you don't need to be some guru. It's really just tapping into, what can I do to gain this person's trust so they know that I am here for them. I'm listening. I'm here to help, you know, if I can. And, you know, they matter and they can speak to me. It's just really, really human to human experience.
Yeah, and we were talking before, like, I love this because we were talking before the meeting yesterday when we were preparing, saying that it just, like, I kind of gave the example of a doctor who has a good bedside manner. I mean, that's just kind of what it feels like, that in this case, you know, as a lawyer, as a practitioner of the law, that we are just working towards having, you know, a good bedside manner, if you will, that hears and is relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to task you to come up with a legal version of bedside manner. I don't know what that is.
Right. I don't know.
But that's really great. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, as I'm thinking of particular tips, you know, for example, besides say moving away from that, I also often do things to make myself more relatable. You know, when people are hesitant about talking about the deepest, darkest secrets of their family, not one time, you know, not 10 times have I, you know, broken the ice some or said something like, you know what? Well, first of all, as attorneys, making sure they understand everything if they're saying is confidential. That seems to be something in the back of people's mind. I should have mentioned that. So even though you may have said it before, but stress, you know, this is confidential. Like, I'm not going to tell this to anyone, you know, this is safe. But aside from that, I've either looked at people or, since COVID on the phone, I've said, listen, I understand that navigating family issues are hard. I mean,
Right.
my own family gets on my nerves, right?
Right.
Everyone chuckles at that, right? They go, oh,
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, I know what it's like when my own
Yes.
families are trying my every bit of patience with whatever
Right.
going on. So
Sure.
don't think I'm immune. I understand it's tough. It's hard dealing with family issues. And, I'm here to help, and just always infusing, those kind of ways to be relatable and, as if we're in it together,
Sure.
kind of feel.
Heather, did you want to chime in? I think we have a question in the
Kristen,
chat.
it looks like we have a comment in the chat or a question.
Sure.
And what what Jolene would like to know is, for Janine, have these strategies changed with COVID? I mean, when you're talking to someone over the phone versus being in person with them face to face, have you had to make any sort of adaptations?
Only in that, when the deal with speaking to someone in person, of course, you have the advantage of them seeing your body language and your facial expressions. So even while they're talking, you can give nonverbal communication, which I've done a lot of things on. So if you're interested, you should go look into it. I love the whole nonverbal communication bit, like don't cross your legs if you're not angry. So, or cross your arms, but, so yes, in person, I can, nodding your head when they're talking and, showing that you're engaged and things like that. The only thing I would say for the phone, because clearly you're not looking at me, is what the things I just mentioned. I have to give verbal cues that I'm, like saying things about, hey, my family's messed up, whatever. Or I understand, I can, I understand it's going to be difficult, but right. Please know everything you're saying is confidential. And frankly, the more I know, the more I can help, that kind of thing. So just having to be more verbal about it. But on the whole, no, it's all that same, the idea of being empathetic and relatable.
The message is the same.
The message is the same.
Hitting verbally or non-verbally. And then we have another comment and question from Angelica, who's asked, do you have any tips for both being empathetic and listening to a client, but using time effectively?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So especially when we are bringing on new staff, and for example, you'll get new staff and they'll do a client intake, and I will give a time limit, like a whole intake from start to not finish, should be like 30 to 45 minutes, and then leaving 15 minutes for notes. So you can do your notes and whatever needs to happen. So it needs to be an hour. And I remember new attorneys come in, they're doing like an hour and a half, 2 hours for an intake, right? So of course I come back around, I'm like, what's going on? And then, and they'll say, oh, well, I didn't want to interrupt. And, they were talking and I felt so bad. And I didn't want to interrupt. And that's walking that fine line. You as the practitioner, you always need to remain in control of the situation. Like you can't let the client's emotional or whatever take over to the point where you're spending double the amount of time in your day that you should, because that's not effective overall. Like I know I work for a nonprofit. Everyone's out there. There's one thing we're 100% always short on: resources and money. So I don't have time for people to spend double the amount of hours on right. people when we couldn't, we just don't have that kind of luxury. So in that, gosh, I could probably do a separate class on this alone, but very quickly, again, when I say remaining in control, you definitely want to be the captain of the ship. You want to allow for the moments for them to be able to give their experience, but when you've heard enough that you need, or you can tell when they're going, a little off on a tangent, let's say, for lack of a better term, they could be talking about what happened in 1972. I mean, they're getting, and just, I have these things at the ready. Oh, Miss Jones, you know what? if you just hold on to that for one moment, I totally want to hear about that. But I want to make sure before we leave each other that I have everything that I need to move your matter forward. So if you can just let me get back, right? So did I cut you off? Yes, but I cut you off really nice.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's a very good point, because I'm not a lawyer on Senior Law Center staff. I'm the director of development, and so one year I called clients, GRG clients, because we wanted to do a where are they now kind of story, and it turned into me passionately listening for hours and hours about how their grandchildren were doing better and thriving, and some of them had jobs and the whole nine, and it was great. And some had graduated from college and so on and so forth. But that, I mean, I spent at least 4 hours. So Angelica, that's a very good question and very good point. Because I easily got sucked into just listening and hearing. And I was like, this is great. This is wonderful. Oh my gosh.
It is
so it was just easy to do. So I agree with that.
I agree. That was a great question about that. Just, being compassionate, it doesn't mean you have to abandon, all, sense and reason. You're being compassionate, and then you find very compassionate ways to steer that ship back where you need it to be, and get what needs to be done.
This is wonderful. So yes, keep those questions coming in comments as you have them. And we're going to continue. And so basically, Janine, I'm just wanting to know, like, after you've built this rapport, I mean, is it just smooth sailing from there after this relationship that we're all been talking about is established? How then do you move forward with the case and that relationship? Is it smooth from there? Is that the hardest part? How does that work?
Well, I certainly wish I could say, once you establish that relationship, and it may not be just from that first consultation, but often it is, where they are at a point of comfort and feel like, yes, okay, great. Sure. To say it's smooth sailing from there, as you mentioned, not necessarily. You have to always, keep your antennae up, basically be alert. Just like, picking on that hypo, oh, why is this person being evasive about these questions? Well, once your representation is gone forward, and say you're working a case, it may be, why is this client never calls me back? Or, why do I call them 10 times? Or why is it they're supposed to come show up for some appointment at my office and they no call, no show? Or why is it I've asked 3 times for these documents? I've said I need these documents. They won't give me documents. Like, what's going on? So then, you may think this person is not taking it seriously, or this person doesn't respect my time, or this person, is being uncooperative. And as I love to say, well, that may be true. Look, I'm not saying difficult people don't exist, right? Some people are difficult. Some people may not respect your time. I mean, I can't, it's possible. But being trauma informed means don't just go for that low hanging, super obvious answer, the Captain Obvious answer. They're not calling us back. They don't want this case. Well, instead of just writing them off at that point, or starting getting, having this attitude shift for you, maybe look deeper. And again, we mentioned it before, but could it be that they are grieving? Could it be that they having to speak with you means they have to keep talking about this traumatic situation about their family, and they didn't have it in them that day? Could it be that, during the pandemic, they are sheltering at home with 2 school-age kids, virtually learning on a computer? They may have never even been that close to a computer in their lives. Yeah. Now they have to monitor a child who may or may not be in need of in-school services for their behavioral or emotional issues. So they don't have that. And maybe when it got to 3 o'clock and they were supposed to come show up, maybe they didn't have it in them that day.
Right.
Maybe they were tapped out. Yeah. I know I can be tapped out. So, and thank grace of God, I don't even have to deal with that. But but we all can reach a limit.
Exactly.
And they're holding so much. So and just not taking the extra time to try to see, what is going on? What's the barrier here? What is the slow communication? What is this?
Right.
You know, digging deeper is being trauma informed.
Love it. Love it. It sounds like this is a lot of work and sometimes can be maybe a little bit of extra work, right? Because I feel like even though you try to be empathetic and put the time limits on it, right? There may be times where the intake takes slightly longer. You know, it's just a very intentional approach to serving clients, and these families need so much representation. I mean, is it easy for a grandmother, a grandfather, a great grandmother, a great aunt to find help?
No, I'm just trying to find a better way to. No, it's not. Okay, so
Right.
no sugarcoat. I'll explain why. Taking, let's say, Philadelphia, and I know, people may be here from all over, but just to pick on Philadelphia, my hometown, Philadelphia is nationally ranked for many things, around, poverty and disenfranchisement. For example, the percentage of homelessness, the lack of affordable housing, food instability. A couple years back, Kensington, a neighborhood in Philadelphia, was recognized as the largest open air drug market in the country. You know what I mean? A couple years ago, Philadelphia was the 4th hungriest city in the nation. Okay. So when you have these kind of stats, you're talking about a demographic that has a huge a faction of issues dealing around poverty, and also adding to it that Philadelphia is a majority minority city, and that over 50% of the residents, I should say not minority, over 50% of the residents are Black or African American in particular. So gosh, I don't have the number in front of me, but I want to say, like the remaining 46% or something of Philadelphia residents are every other minority and white people. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's like you have a majority Black city that is nationally ranked, for a lot of right reasons. That is my town, but for some unfortunate reasons as well. So when you're pulling from this demographic, and now because of our subset, a senior law center, you're also older, 6 year older, these issues aren't better, that you're now of an older age. So they're not able to hire an attorney, So to answer the question, can they just get some legal help? Like, no, because they are not the demographic who can hire an attorney. The overall majority, we have many practice areas in our organization, but the overall majority, just across the board, we have our, minorities who are in poverty or deep poverty. Like that's like the biggest demographic of our clients, right? So if these are the people who need help, they're not going to be able to just go hire an attorney. They just don't have those kind of resources. Like they would rely on pro bono work.
Right. Okay. So do they only, is that what you're saying? Is that how they seek help then, through pro bono counsel? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, that would be the number one thing they would have to assist them. Unfortunately, again, I'm just a bearer of bad news right now. Unfortunately, again, because of the type of cases, these third-party cases, again, for custody, because of the special, needs, again, like also third-party cases also are ruled by a separate statute, this particular statute. It's not even governed by the same normal custody statutes, like between parents. So with all of this subspecialty, it really is kind of like a subcategory of type of custody matters, and not everyone does or has the experience with. Furthermore, when you are a nonprofit and you're getting your funds, the priority for third party, grandparent custody matters
Sure.
Let me tell you, that's not a priority for people.
Right. Yes.
We are blessed and fortunate because we're senior law center and all of our folks have to be a certain age.
Sure.
We have a priority because that's what we do. But we're the only ones that actually prioritize third-party custody. Other legal aid organizations, even if they would take it or could take it, it's back burner. That's not their priority. Okay. It's not their main, what they wrote for their funding. It wasn't that. Versus this is what we do. So if that gives any insight, it's not easy because it's not easy to get legal help because they don't have the money to hire private. And then it's not easy to get pro bono because we are amazing Senior Law Center, but we can't do it all.
Sure,
we can't do it all. So, and since we're the only ones who prioritize it, they often get shut out and they don't have legal representation available to them.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. So I have an anonymous question that wants to know tips about sharing yourself or things about yourself in order to relate to a client. When do you cross the line in oversharing such that it's harmful to the client or problematic? This individual is saying that they err on the side of really not sharing anything personal about themselves. Is it ever okay to say something more like, I've been there or I've been somewhere similar? Where do you cross the line on oversharing?
Well, exactly what you just said, Kristen, and even harking back to what I mentioned earlier. Again, when I say I said something to relate, is literally that, like my family, right? Like I understand family problems. Yeah. I didn't say anything specific. And frankly, I'm not even talking about anything. That may have been
right.
True.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying it to be relatable.
To be relatable.
So, exactly. So I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm not saying, yes, this time my cousin went to court. No. I'm just letting you know if I'm seeing that they are reticent, or as pick up Kristen, it's not unusual for a certain, age group to have that sense of, that pride. Like, I don't want y'all to know what's going on with my son, the kind of thing.
Right.
And I'm just saying, hey, families can be difficult, situations can be difficult. And honey, I get it. I know.
Yes.
I get it. So you're safe with me. So that's it. So exactly, I think you said in the question, like, oh, I've been there, the kind of thing. I mean, frankly, now I'm going down the weeds. Be careful about saying I've been there, because it's kind of saying as if you have been in their shoes, and really nobody really has been in anybody else's shoes. But what I mean? So it's kind of like, but not necessarily you probably haven't been there, but saying things like, I know what it's like to have to deal with family tragedy. Okay. I know what it's like to feel, family crisis. I haven't been through this, but I know what it's like when I'm trying to help a family member. And whatever, and they don't know what I'm talking about. Like we talk about how to get to the market. Right. I mean, it doesn't matter what I'm saying. We know what I mean, but you're saying the words invite empathy, and and also if you're coming from the best, most perfect situation, for example, in the world, if you're watching and you're like, I don't have any of that. I've never bothered. My family's great. You can say, I can't imagine what you're going through.
Right. Uh-huh.
I can't imagine. I'm here to listen. Wow, this sounds so tough, and you are being so brave to take this on. I'm really honored I can just be here and hopefully help you navigate this. I just really want to help your family. I couldn't imagine.
That's perfect.
Look at that. You said nothing about yourself.
Right. Yes. Awesome. Another question from Angelica for the skeptic. How would you say being trauma-informed may positively impact the attorney-client relationship and or case outcome?
What was the question again?
For the skeptic, how would you say being trauma-informed may positively impact the attorney-client relationship and or the case outcome?
Oh, sure. Okay, so the point of going through all of these steps to be more cohesive with your client, first of all, when you create the relationship where your client is trusting of you, you're achieving multiple things. One, you're getting a better client. Okay. you're the chances of them being more responsive to you, of them keeping their deadlines, of them, the communication being what it needs to be is higher because they trust you and they trust that you're really trying to help, not more lip service from,
Sure.
whoever else they've had to deal with. So one thing is you're creating a better client. When you're creating a better client to work with, you're now creating a better opportunity for you to advocate better. As any attorneys watching, unless you've been barred for a day, you've been in situations where you were caught off guard because your client did not withheld information that ended up being very important. And by the time you find it out, it is too late. And all you're left with is, the next, post the issue saying, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't prepare for that. Why didn't you tell me? Right. And again, you're going to lessen the chance of your client withholding if they feel they can trust you and that you're not judging them and that you're not, passing, not judging, judgment, also not, looking down on them or, looking down on their family or thinking less of them because they're in the situation. When they believe that you're really together, and I like to think of us as teammates, like I said, we're teammates. The client and I are a team, and the opponent is the issue. I make it clear that the opponent isn't their son, it's not their daughter, it's not because don't forget, you're trying to get someone to do something in their mind. They're thinking they're doing something against their family member. I mean, you'll have someone saying, oh my gosh, my daughter did this, and this to my grandson. She's not safe. I do want my grandson, but I don't know how to think I'm taking it. And you're thinking like, what? After she did all this, you should, but you can't intercede your own thought process. Right. That's still her child. That's still his son, no matter what. So they still have this way they often are trying to protect, even if the parent, for example, is the wrongdoer. So you have to get them to understand, I'm not here against your son or daughter. Right. I'm here against the issue. It's me and you against the issue. And as long as I, establish that, I can tell you, I've never taken the time to do this and it failed. Yeah. That I promise you. I've never taken the time to go through this and it failed. It can't fail. And then also I'm very lovable.
Yeah, you are, Janine. Okay, we have another question. It says, I do mostly custody and often clients will ask me whether I have children. I don't and don't want them, but I would prefer not to answer this question. How can I deflect the question without sounding like I am blowing someone off? They are sharing so much and I don't want to seem cold.
I wish I could read. So I'm just listening. For some reason, I don't see the questions, but it sounds like you're saying if someone asks something personal, I want to answer. I can't give like a one line answer because it really depends on what's the context or why. So if whatever you're doing, and if someone asks, do you have children? I think, do you have children?
Yeah, this one specifically was they do custody cases and they're being asked, do you have children? They don't, and they're fine with that. How do you answer the question without seeming cold and deflecting?
You know what? My initial response, since it's so simple and the answer is no, I would just say, no, I don't, and then move on. I don't know. I just feel like you don't have to, I think before you said, no, I don't want any, that kind of thing. Like that doesn't matter. I feel like because the answer is so simple, that the answer is no, I don't have kids. There's no more to discuss. Conversely, it would be more problematic if I have two boys, like I do have children. And I can't think of anyone ever actually asking me that, but I know I'm doing something different in my custody. But that's more problematic because if I say yes, and then you may want to start asking about my children, right? See, that's more problematic. Now I'm like, crap, I'm not trying to go into my kids. To me, the fact that the answer is no, do you have children? No, actually, I don't. So it says here, move on. Answer the question, move on. I don't know. don't see the harm in that. It's a fact, and there's nothing more to be said about it.
Judy also chimes in and says, for children, I will sometimes redirect to focus on the client situation. She also doesn't have kids and does custody work and has been asked. That's a very good point, Judy. Yeah, to just redirect. That's a great answer.
Move on to the next. Yeah.
And Maggie is sharing, sometimes I think it's worth asking if that person is worried that maybe I can't effectively represent them, work with them if I don't have the same experience. And that could be relevant in a lot of ways besides just parent, non-parent. Exploring if they have any concerns, validate, but also explain that they are experts in their own situation. And I'm going to be there to help navigate the system. That's definitely,
my goodness.
That's definitely great.
If I had a whole other day, I wish, and I'm looking at the time constraints, oh my goodness, but I can say you hit the nail on the head. Those are things you have to think through. And in your written materials, oh my gosh, I don't actually able to say our contact information. You know what? I don't know if it is, but in the materials, you have all of our bios. We all work for SeniorLAW Center. And if you go to our website, you can certainly reach us there. Our contact is there. I was going to say, I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out after this and have more conversation and ideas, because I do consider myself, a guru of how to navigate situations and conversations. And just for example, not having the same experience, again, that can be across anything. So that's called,
yes, that's a very
that's
good
talking
point.
like, are you culturally competent? Forget, do you have kids or not? Do you have cultural competency? Do you, that could just be so many things. I'm like, I do love that question. So that being said, it is not, I'm losing my words. It's not like logical or feasible, is what I'm trying to say. It's not feasible to think that the attorney has to have walked in the shoes of everyone you've met. I mean, that's not how it is.
Yeah.
Just for the simple fact that, we're all working at this organization and our demographic of people, I've had clients say just, oh my goodness, it's just so amazing, their education level stopped at whatever. And so had their, generations below them. And they're like, wow, you're a lawyer and you're this and you're that. This is so unbelievable to them. And happy, like, wow, it's great. You look young. I look young. You're young and you're a lawyer, and whatever. And they're so proud of that. So just from that alone, clearly I have not had your lived experience. I know that, you know that. Yeah. However, I find where the other commonalities. So finding the other common ground. And also, don't forget, you're providing a service. So regardless of the lived experience, what you need to be cognizant of so you to be a better advocate, but don't forget, you also have the golden egg, the legal expertise. So let's not get bogged down. Oh, thanks, Kelly. Let's not get bogged down with, do I know what it's like to lose a child to heroin? Let's encourage the fact that you actually have someone who will help you, who knows the system, who knows the laws. I can actually come help you get to a resolution. So again, redirect on with the positives that you bring, not the fact that you don't know what it's like to be fill in the blank. If that makes any sense.
And what I'm learning today and have learned from you all so much about the trauma-informed piece is that caring doesn't necessarily mean that I understand every aspect of your life. It just means that I am willing to go through the process with you and to lead you into the next space with you, with my, professional experience. And so I think that that's the beauty of this, the trauma-informed, is that you're just jumping in the fire with them, caring enough to jump in. Haven't been there maybe in every area, but I care enough to listen. Exactly. And then to provide the care and the service that you need.
Yes. And I see your voice of reason. I just don't want
you
being here. I'm like,
she's back. Okay, so I want to turn to you. I just wanted to ask a question. We're all here What can the attorneys do? How can we move this forward? Talk to us, voice of reason.
Great, Kristen, all good questions. And as Janine alluded to, so trauma and poverty intersect, we know that. And this is frequently seen in her cases, the cases involving grand families and grandparents raising grandchildren. Often the folks who need trauma-informed lawyers cannot afford to hire them. So pro bono attorneys can provide that valuable assistance that these clients need, and that, quite frankly, legal service providers, the attorneys who are practicing this day in and day out, when they need a little bit of relief, pro bono attorneys can step in and help manage their caseload a little bit. The Pennsylvania rules of professional conduct provide that a lawyer should render public interest legal service. So providing pro bono legal services isn't just a nice thing to do, it's strongly suggested under the rules. In particular, if we take a look at Rule 6.1, it advises that an attorney should render public interest legal service. It provides that an attorney can do that in a few different ways. First, by providing services for free or a reduced fee to persons of limited means, or a public service or a charitable organization. Second, an attorney can provide service in activities for improving the law, the legal system, or the legal profession. And finally, they can provide service by providing financial support for organizations that provide legal services to persons of limited means. The first option is really what we're talking about when we talk about pro bono service, right? Providing direct representation or direct advice to the clients, providing free services to persons of limited means. And this can be clients who approach a private firm directly for help, or it can be providing pro bono service via a legal aid organization that matches pro bono volunteer attorneys with clients. The comments, if we look at the comments to Rule 6.1, go on to make it very important. They're very clear that it is the basic responsibility of each lawyer to provide public interest legal services in one or more of the following areas: poverty law, civil rights law, public rights law, charitable organization representation, or the administration of justice. However, these comments also clearly state that this rule is not intended to be enforced by the disciplinary process. So you're not going to be pulled before the disciplinary board if you don't offer pro bono legal service, right? The comments stress that the need for legal services is imperative for people of modest means, just as it is for the well-to-do. All of our rights and responsibilities are increasingly defined in legal terms. Thus, the comments imply that without legal aid, representation, or a pro bono attorney, the rights and individuals of those of modest means may not be protected. Efforts of individual lawyers are not enough, and thus legal aid offices and referral services have been developed and provided for by the profession, by the government, and by other nonprofits. Lawyers should, according to the comments, support efforts to meet the need for legal services. Again, the comments here imply that lawyers should support legal aid and pro bono programs. They can do that by providing financial support, by advocating for their funding, or by providing direct legal services to individual clients. Law firms also should enable and encourage their lawyers in their firms to provide pro bono legal services. We see this put into place by firms that have pro bono requirements or that allow associates to count the time spent on pro bono matters toward their billable hour requirement. Finally, as the comments point out, personally helping the disadvantaged can be one of the most rewarding experiences in the life of the lawyer. This isn't me editorializing, this comes directly from the comments. Using your legal skills to provide access to justice can be empowering both for the client and for the attorney. It should go without saying that pro bono clients receive the same level of service as a paying client in terms of responsiveness, timeliness, respect, and communication. There is no ethical discount for your pro bono clients. Apart from full representation, attorneys can also provide limited legal services to clients. One example is the SeniorLAW Center's helpline, where staff attorneys and pro bono volunteers provide advice and referrals to callers. Rule 6.5 provides us with guidelines on nonprofit and court-appointed limited legal service programs. The important takeaways are as follows. First, a lawyer who provides short-term legal services must secure the client's informed consent to the limited scope of representation. So, for example, if you're giving advice via a helpline, the client needs to be advised and understand that this is not full service representation. Perhaps you're only providing the client with pro se support on a custody filing, and they may need to go ahead and appear in court by themselves. Maybe you're only providing that initial advice. You need to make it clear to the client that this is just a limited scope of representation or a limited legal service in that you're only providing advice. Second, if limited representation is not reasonable under the circumstances, a lawyer may offer advice, but must advise the client to seek further assistance of counsel. Obviously, this can be a catch-22 situation where where you're advising a client who can't afford to hire an attorney to go ahead and seek assistance of counsel, and there may not be free legal services organization or a pro bono attorney who will take the case for full representation. So obviously that can be a real problem. One final comment regarding pro bono service as it relates to trauma-informed practice. As we are about to discuss, and as many of you know, vicarious trauma can impact full-time public interest attorneys. Pro bono service can lighten that burden on those attorneys and reduce their exposure to traumatizing cases. So, Kristen, pro bono service can include taking on full representation, or it can be providing limited legal service such as advice. There's a need for both. And as a reminder, there's an actual ethical rule compelling us to do so.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea that there were ethical rules attached to that. That's awesome. Do pro bono work. Call SeniorLAW Center. We need your help. We need all the pro bono help we can get. We're always recruiting, always looking for people who have the capacity to do that. I know that COVID presented its own set of challenges there, but yes. Okay. Go do it. Go be great. Janine?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. Of course, I am going to co-sign any rooting for providing pro bono services. And again, shameless plug, SeniorLAW Center, certainly happy to have you. More specifically, the GRG project.
Yes.
But
right, I could definitely use like a family practice group.
Yes,
a GRG practice group for sure.
Yes.
That would be awesome.
Yes.
All right, we spent a lot of time talking about how attorneys could be more engaged and invested in their lawyering, and that was excellent. But I understand that there is another side to this, and that is vicarious trauma. Is that right?
Yes. So this is an equally important issue. You know, attorneys who continuously deal with heavy emotional areas such as custody or, you know, criminal cases or, you know, domestic violence and things like that. As humans, constantly having to deal with these sorts of heavy issues will take its toll over time. And it certainly can do that if you, or should say we, practitioners, if you don't plan ahead and to stay mentally and emotionally healthy. So it's practicing self-care to recognize and be prepared for vicarious trauma.
Great. So can you give some examples of what this might look like?
Sure. So, you know, vicarious trauma, first, it has a couple of names, you know, maybe secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout. You know, it's basically when a person who's not directly involved with the actual traumatic situation, i.e. attorneys, or social workers, anyone like that. But they end up experiencing adverse effects due to dealing with other people's problems. So it's like trauma by proxy,
Sure.
I just made that up, I'm coining that. But it's carrying the work burden home with you, and basically, how are you separating that? Therapists have therapists, ministers and priests and whatnot, they have spiritual guidance, seek spiritual guidance and things like that. So as practitioners, where do you go with the stuff? And I'll give you some examples of, what this can look like. For example, it can cause a sleep disturbance. I'm talking about symptoms of vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. Sleep disturbance, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of skepticism, loss of empathy. Again, that goes with that compassion fatigue, hypervigilance, which is important to think about. If you feel like you have to, if you have to engage in certain activities that may be either skirting on ethical, rules, or even if it's not an ethical rule, if you're doing something that's skirting outside of your own firm or organization's, processes and procedures, your own, internal rules and regulations. But if you feel that somehow the only way I can help this client is I have to go cross these lines, that could be a symptom of hypervigilance, and you really need to think about that. And also, if you see that in colleagues, you may want to, take a note and maybe try to step in. And also the loss of motivation. Loss of motivation. That's not just me, whereas I'm a procrastinator. It's not that I'm not motivated. It's just I feel I work my best when I just got the minimum amount of time. I'm a genius, So it's not procrastination. It's that loss of motivation when you feel like you don't feel a purpose to do what you're doing, and that can affect your work product. And again, look at me, I'm doing your job. See, I like it. I see the voice of reason is here.
Yes, Heather, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did.
You want to add something, Heather?
I do. So I wanted to note that there are ethical considerations surrounding vicarious trauma as well. While there's no rules that says attorneys need to be trauma informed and or be aware of vicarious trauma can be an ethical pitfall, as Janine alluded to. I'm about to read you something on the impact of vicarious trauma on job performance, and I'd love it if participants could chime in via the chat and give me their thoughts on what ethical rules might be implicated in these situations. So according to the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress, vicarious or secondary trauma can cause reduced empathy towards clients, an inability to listen to or active avoidance of clients, over-identification with clients, or conversely shutting down emotionally, distancing oneself from exposure to key aspects of a client's history and ongoing trauma, thereby potentially missing events with high probative value in litigation, overreaction by displaying hypervigilance through angry outbursts in court, or unduly questioning the credibility of witnesses when emotional legal issues become triggers, excessive anger or irritability as a result of secondary traumatic stress may be masked by zealous advocacy in a trial setting, but may be in fact damaging to the attorney and client. Compromised quality of legal service due to emotional depletion or cognitive effects of secondary trauma. Some traumatized professionals believe they can no longer be of service to their clients and end up leaving their jobs or the serving field altogether. Several studies indicate that the development of secondary traumatic stress often predicts that a helping professional will eventually leave the field for another type of work altogether. Okay, so I don't know if we see anything in the chat, but those impacts on job performance do have real ethical implications. And let's take a look at some of those implications. So if anyone wants to to chime in here in the chat. What rules do you think might be implicated? I think the first one that I think of is Rule 1.4, communication. This is one of the longer rules, but we do know that we have a duty to communicate with our clients. We have a duty to promptly inform the client of any decision or circumstance with respect to which the client's informed consent is required by the rules, to reasonably consult with the client about the means by which the client's objectives are to be accomplished. And then skip through, to keep the client reasonably informed about the status of a matter and promptly comply with reasonable requests for information. Okay, so that's just the rule in part. But when we look at the description of vicarious trauma and the types of job-related problems an attorney can encounter, we see that communication with the client can definitely be impacted. For example, consulting with a client to meet their objectives. If the attorney is over-identifying with the client and they believe they know what the client wants in terms of a settlement or in terms of an outcome, they could fail to consult with the client on important settlement matters and think, I know what the client wants, I know what's best. And that's obviously an ethical breach. If they don't keep the client informed about the status of the case, because they're so stressed out about the case or they want to avoid the case, if they simply don't respond to the client's request for information, that is a breach of that duty to communicate with the client. If they're not explaining the matter to the client so that they can make informed decisions. Again, if the attorney is kind of expressing a paternalistic attitude and saying, well, I know what's best, don't worry, I've got this taken care of, that is a violation of the rule and is a serious concern. The next rule that I think about when we look at these things, that these jobs, factors that can be influenced by vicarious trauma, is the duty of diligence. This is a short rule, and it basically says a lawyer shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client. And as the comments point out, perhaps there is no professional shortcoming more widely resented than procrastination. Avoiding work or avoiding addressing a case that the attorney finds upsetting is going to be a violation of the rule and can have a real impact on the case. If the client isn't looking at probative evidence regarding the client's past or current trauma, that could be detrimental to the case. If they're not doing their due diligence in investigating, that's going to have an impact on the case. And it also could potentially be a violation of the rule. And as the comments point out, when it comes to procrastination, that delay can cause a client needless anxiety and undermine the confidence in the lawyer's trustworthiness. So this is the opposite of what we're trying to do with clients who have experienced trauma. We want to make sure that we try and reduce their anxiety and build their sense of trust. And when we delay and don't get back to them, or we don't work on issues, that undermines that sense of trust. So that's definitely a pitfall we want to be aware of. And then finally, when we talk about, very generally speaking, the attorney's duty of competence, a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. Competent representation requires legal knowledge, skill, thoughtfulness, and preparation for the representation. So here, when we're talking about vicarious trauma, our concern isn't knowledge or skill. We can kind of presume that the attorneys have that. However, attorneys who are experiencing vicarious trauma, that trauma can impact their thoroughness and their preparation of the case. As the comments to this rule point out, competent handling of a particular matter includes inquiry into and analysis of the factual and legal elements of the problem. Again, if we have a situation where the attorney is avoiding that inquiry, into factual elements because they find something triggering or traumatic, that can be detrimental to the case. Or perhaps the attorney is so emotionally depleted that they aren't working on the case at all. They aren't reviewing the evidence. They aren't critically thinking about the case. They aren't preparing for the case. If an attorney is experiencing the cognitive effects of vicarious trauma, they may be violating their duty of competence because they're not thorough and they're not prepared. Finally, I wanted to touch on bias. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court adopted a variation of ABA Model Rule 8.4G. This language to the rule was recently amended again recently this past summer, and effective August 25th of 2001, now states that it is professional misconduct for a lawyer in the practice of law to knowingly engage in conduct constituting harassment or discrimination based on race, sex, gender identity or expression, religion, national origin, ethnicity, disability, age, sexual orientation, marital status, or socioeconomic status. Please note that the language in the slides is correct, but the materials that were previously sent out contain the old language. So if this is a rule that you really want to compare side by side, you should go online and take a look at the rule. But the language in the slides today is correct. Attorneys who are experiencing vicarious trauma, especially those who see vicarious trauma impacting their job performance and how they relate to their clients, may want to monitor and evaluate, are they manifesting bias and therefore committing attorney misconduct by violating the rule? But more importantly, manifesting bias can lead to re-traumatization in some cases. Most of us are aware that we have conscious and unconscious biases, and we need to be aware that those biases, especially when we're working with individuals who may have experienced trauma, or we're working with individuals who belong to underserved or marginalized populations. We don't want to make assumptions about clients based upon any sort of factors. We want to come in without our biases, or try and put our biases aside. It's important, and I think worth noting, that severe or pervasive racism can be a form of trauma. And when an attorney who is supposed to help makes assumptions about their client and demonstrates bias, that bias can be re-traumatizing to the client. So therefore, it's really important that attorneys, particularly attorneys who are working with individuals who have experienced trauma, that they address and understand vicarious trauma can have an impact on their job performance, and it has ethical implications. Thanks, Kristen.
Awesome. And I think that Kelly wants to launch the second poll. So Kelly? All right. So you can answer that and we will finish up here. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Janine. That was just wonderful information. I feel like we could do a whole nother session on vicarious trauma alone. What can attorneys do to combat this, though?
I know time is winding up, and I just wanted to take just a minute to say that the way to combat, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, is basically plan, prepare, and practice. I also made that up. I'm in the wrong business. I'm actually very kitschy with this stuff. I'm telling you, I'm making this up as we're going along. But it's like planning, and prepare and practice. And basically what I mean is, you don't want to wait until you are starting to exhibit symptoms or starting to have manifestations of these issues. We're starting to drop the ball with clients and things like that. To then say, hey, I think I should reach out. Start now. Hopefully, if you're not experiencing any of these issues, but if you are, it's never too late. But start now. Start figuring out, how do I change gears? How do I turn off? How do I separate my professional and personal space?
Right. Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally, physically. Do I create boundaries? Do I take work calls and answer emails off hours constantly? Not sometimes, but constantly. I mean, do you feel like the world will not turn if you don't answer your emails on Saturday night? Like, have some boundaries, separate, have work time, have you
Right.
time,
Right.
whatever you time means for you. And also definitely during these COVID times, I've heard so much about and participated in, guided meditation and yoga and things like that. That's great. But don't think that you have to subscribe to anything in particular. The only person who has to feel rejuvenated is you. Maybe guided meditation is your thing. Maybe it's playing solitaire and Candy Crush and vegging out on your phone. I personally like trash reality TV. So the bottom line is do what you can for yourself that brings you joy. And make sure you're doing it now so that it's already in practice so you can combat these issues that can occur from your work environment.
That is perfect. And that is a perfect way to end today. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Heather. Thank you to everyone who joined. This was a very, very, very engaged crew. And I just thank you for joining the Legal Review with Kristen. And we had a great conversation about DRG, about vicarious trauma, about trauma-informed care. And I hope that we can go into our spaces of life, learning more about how we can care for the clients that we come in contact with, and learning more about ourselves and how we can take more time for self-care. Enjoy your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Heather. This was really fantastic. I can't really say anything other than that. So thank you so much for being with us. Everybody that joined us, we'll see you at the next session. And everybody take care of yourself and each other.